Hello, and welcome once again to Not a Prog Reborn, but more Magic the Gathering spoilers. We're continuing our fast and furious look at the cards from the upcoming Magic the Gathering set, Lorwyn Eclipsed. My name is M. Kosler. I'm a long-time Magic the Gathering player. Been playing 25-ish years since around the Onslaught block. Taken breaks in various times, but have been back since around Bloomborough. Primarily a best of one standard player on Magic the Gathering Arena. Made Mythic many times there, but last season did spend some time seeing if I could make Mythic in a limited for the Avatar The Last Airbender limited format, and did so there as well. So I'm going to be focusing my reviews on those two formats. I might bring up some Commander implications, especially if it's something for one of the decks that I run. Prosper. I've got the Ashtola Precon, but I'm probably not going to touch that one. Mainly Prosper and Old Rutstein would be things that I would look at, or like Abdel Adrian. But primarily going to be focusing on standard and from a standard and limited perspective. Yesterday we made it through all the way to red, but as we are in the middle of spoiler season, and they are releasing many cards each day, we are going to, I went and pulled everything that's available that's in its OG card art from Skyfall. And we've got to back up and do a little bit of cleanup to get back to where we were with red, and then go from there. So yeah, we're going to go ahead and immediately start off with a color that we hadn't talked about at all, because it's colorless. Rooftop Percher for 5 generic. We have a creature Shapeshifter at common. It is a 3/3 with Changeling. It has flying, and whenever this creature enters, exile up to 2 target cards from graveyards. You gain 3 life. What I like to do when I do any of these spoiler review videos or live streams is the first time that we see a new or returning mechanic, really, as long as it's not an evergreen mechanic like flying, and especially if it's a featured mechanic for the set, we're going to take the first time that we see it, we're going to take the time to explain what it is, but then going forward, we're going to assume we're all on the same page, unless there's something specific or new to bring up for the whatever particular card we're looking at. For Lorwyn, both the original Lorwyn and obviously this Lorwyn, heavily featured Changelings. They worked very well in the limited environment, as the set is very kindred based, very tribal based, and being able to have creatures that can fit into many of those tribal archetypes, or any of those tribal archetypes, to be exact, is good. And maybe if your deck happens to be trying to support multiple archetypes, if you're trying to be like some sort of 3-color deck where you're both elves and goblins, well then Changelings, which are creatures that have every creature type, can support both sides of your deck. Outside of just talking like that, this is clearly draft filler. It's clearly for if you are desperate for synergy, for a synergy piece, to make sure that you have some creature synergy that's being taken advantage of. It's generic mana, so you don't have to worry about what colors you're in. 5 mana for a 3/3 flyer, that's not really what we're doing these days. Even with the ETB incidental graveyard hate in life gain, I don't really think that this is going to be that important. Maybe if it's an extremely slow format or very synergistic, something like this could be okay to keep you alive, to have a flyer, but I wouldn't think that this would be a high draft pick. And standard, absolutely not playable. So, only colorless card so far we've seen. On to our first new white card, Burdened Stoneback. For 1 and a white, we have a creature, Giant Warrior, at uncommon. It is a 4/4 that enters the battlefield with 2 -1/-1 counters on it. And then you can pay 1 and a white and remove a counter from this creature to give target creature indestructible until end of turn. Activate only as a sorcery. So it's really a bear. So we'll just get it out of the way. Constructed playability, it's not there. So from a limited perspective, it's a bear. You play it on 2, it's a 2/2 because it's going to enter with 2 -1/-1 counters on it. But it gives indestructible as part of an activated ability, but you can't do it in response. You have to do it proactively. And you do need to think that this is something that you can do that also grows this creature, because most likely you're going to be removing the -1/-1 counters that it had on it. So it'll grow. The first time that you activate this, it'll grow into a 3/3. The second time, it'll grow into a 4/4, and then you're going to have to find other ways to activate it. Being sorcery speed seems very, very awkward. And both being sorcery speed and costing 2 mana for this. Like, sure, you can, like, guarantee that a creature of yours... I'm not even going to say guarantee, because you could be attempting to attack into a larger force where your opponent can just block. But it makes it so that if it would have traded, you could just say, hey, I'm going to attack in, and your opponent they won't chump, they'll just go, okay, I'll take the hit this time. So you're kind of giving it unblockability in very weird scenarios. But this, again, if we go back to last stream, I think I need to see the whole having creatures with -1/-1 counters on them being a benefit in action. And the fact that this is sorcery speed kind of makes me think that it's not very playable. So, Burdened Stoneback. Crib Swap. This is actually a reprint from the original Lorwyn. For 2 and a white, we have a Kindred Instant Shapeshifter. This instant has Changeling, and we'll come back to what it means to be Kindred in a bit. Exile target creature. Its controller creates a 1/1 colorless Shapeshifter creature token with Changeling. So, before we get too big into the card, Kindred Instant. They used, in original Lorwyn, this would be called Tribal Instant. They updated the naming convention to Kindred, I think for sensitivity reasons. But to have Kindred in your super type means that this card, even though it's not a creature, it can represent you either casting, or if it was a permanent, playing and having it can represent as if a creature of that type entered the battlefield or was cast, or for any other instances where you would need to use a creature of the type that this kindred instant is for an effect. Say you behold. Behold is something we've seen a couple times. If you need to behold something and you don't have a creature of that particular type, but if you have a kindred instant of that particular type, or kindred sorcery, or kindred permanent, whatever have you, you can use that to represent that particular type. It's just allowing for a little more synergy for your non-creatures in a very creature synergistic format. As far as the card goes, so this card used to be very, very good. Even saw, you know, a modicum of play in something like Modern. This is way early Modern. But these days, this is basically a card called Stroke of Midnight. 2 and a white, destroy target non-land permanent. Its controller creates a 1/1 white human creature token. Here it is exile and not destroy. And it's a colorless shapeshifter, so it's also a human, but it's colorless. I think really the only thing that this gives you over something like Stroke of Midnight is the fact that it's kindred, so you get that extra synergy with your you know, creature synergistic pieces. Stroke of Midnight wasn't Stroke of Midnight wasn't actually in the Final Fantasy set, but it was part of the bonus sheet as an uncommon card in the bonus sheet. And from what I remember from looking at the 17 lands data, Stroke of Midnight was not a very good removal spell. Just a little too expensive. Sure, it hit. And even Stroke of Midnight hits any non-land permanent. This only hits creatures. Perhaps if you really need to be able to exile something, this can be a little bit better. And obviously, if we don't really know how good the removal is going to be in the format, so maybe this is just premium. But just comparing it to Stroke of Midnight, and Stroke of Midnight, you know, not a very high pick in a lot of different formats. A lot of different limited formats. I'm not so sure about Crib Swap. It's fun to see it get reprinted, and it'll be interesting to see if you can get the value from it being kindred, but just face up, I just worry it's a worse Stroke of Midnight, and the Stroke of Midnight wasn't terribly playable to begin with. Gallant Foul Knight, probably one of my favorite arts in the set that I've seen so far. For 3 and a white, we have a creature Kithkin Knight at common. It is a 3/4 with when this enters, creatures you control get +1/+0 until end of turn, and Kithkin creatures you control also gain first strike until end of turn. Not constructed playable, pretty obviously, but in a Kithkin deck, this is kind of an overrun on a body. You don't get the trample, but you get first strike, so you're going to win that combat. You're going to win most every bit of combat there. You're also giving +1/+0 to all your idiots. And being common, going to be pretty easy to sort of draft these up and chain them. One, do this for one turn, do it the next turn, stuff like that. So I could see it being okay in some kind of aggressive Kithkin deck. Don't really see it as being that great in a non-Kithkin deck. Just giving everything +1/+0 on ETB is a little on the weak side. But yeah, I think it's probably fine in a Kithkin deck in Limited. Kinsbale Aspirant is up next. We have for a single white, we have a 2/1 creature Kithkin Citizen at uncommon. So Savannah Lion stat line. As an additional cost to cast this spell, behold a Kithkin or pay 2 generic. We'll go back to what behold is in a second. Whenever another creature you control enters, this creature gets +1/+1 until end of turn. So to behold, this is something we saw yesterday, but since this is the first time that we're saying today, to behold a blank, in this case Kithkin, you either need to basically point at a Kithkin that you control, or reveal a Kithkin in your hand. Now, that normally is a creature, but we just saw with something like Crib Swap, we could just reveal Crib Swap, and it counts as a Kithkin. Important to note that this is as for the cost of the spell, not as an ETB you must behold or pay 2, because if it was on ETB, you could just behold itself. Pretty good in limited, I think, for Savannah Lion body in limited. If you've got any kind of token generation or a lot of cheap creatures, it can get pretty big pretty quickly, but it's not getting like counters or anything, so kind of a glue piece, I would think, for getting out early in an aggressive Kithkin deck. And being able to attack above its weight class. At uncommon, you're not going to see too many of these, so I was thinking, like, is this kind of... because it kind of works... You could kind of think of this as like the Magitech infantry of this set, but they don't grab each other. Really, my idea was drafting a bunch of these, but given the fact that it's uncommon, you can't really be that guaranteed to draft a bunch of these. So I think it's just all right. Which is kind of shows where Magic is these days. That Savannah Lions is just all right. Luminal Hold is up next. For 3 and a white, we have an enchantment at common. This is when this enchantment enters, exile up to 1 target non-land permanent an opponent controls. Until this enchantment leaves the battlefield, you gain 2 life. So it's Banishing Light for 1 extra mana, but you get 2 life for the extra mana. Again, if we're thinking about Final Fantasy, White Oversight was one of the best cards in white. That one also ramped you, and it was an artifact for a lot of different artifact synergies. Here with Liminal Hold, Banishing Light generally is a pretty good removal spell. This being at common, which is kind of where you see Banishing Light these days. But being at common means that it's going to be, people are going to be able to have answers for kind of anything that's going on if they're in white. So you need to keep that in mind in draft if you're playing. This is probably a pretty premium removal spell in draft. Not going to see any play in standard, pretty obviously, but pretty premium white removal. Pyrrhic Strike. For 2 and a white, we have an instant at uncommon. It says an additional cost to cast this spell. You may blight 2. Choose one. If the spell's additional cost was paid, choose both instead. You can either destroy, and your choices are destroy target artifact or enchantment, and destroy target creature with mana value 3 or greater. So we're going to go back to what blight means. We saw it yesterday, but this is the first time we're seeing it today. To blight something, you put 2 -1/-1 counters on a creature you control. Ooh, and interesting. I didn't think, for some reason, I thought that when I was initially thinking about Blight, it was put two -1/-1 counters on creatures you control. So even though it said Blight 2, you could spread out one here and one here, but that's not true. You have to put this. You have to put all of the -1/-1 counters on a single creature. That's interesting. I'm glad I reread that. See, even I'm learning. Important thing to note: you can't go, all right, I'm going to Blight 2. Oh, I don't have any creatures. Well, I said I was going to, but you know, whatever. You have to actually pay the cost. So you won't, if you have no creatures on the board, you won't be able to choose both. You have to have something that's there. Now, you can Blight 2 and have it kill one of your creatures. If you just have like a 1/1 lying around, you're like, okay, I really need to blow up my opponent's Banishing Light and blow up their bomb. Sure, I'll do it at the cost of this 1/1. That's perfectly fine. They don't have to be, the creature doesn't have to be still living when you blighted it. So keep that in mind when you're making your plays. I think this is a pretty premium removal. Even if you don't get the Blight 2, it's almost always going to be used as a destroy target creature with a mana value 3 or greater. But in a pinch, you know, like a lot of cards that you see nowadays, especially with the rise of Arena and Best of One, you got this sort of modality on the card so that you can have main deck artifact and enchantment hate without feeling like you're having to put a card into your deck that is dead in a lot of matchups. So this is pretty premium for white. Not going to see any standard play, a little too weak on that end, but perfectly fine for limited. Shore Lurker is up next for 3 and a white. We have a creature Merfolk Scout at common. It is a 3/3 with flying that ETBs in Surveils 1. Surveil is pretty evergreen, so I'm not really going to talk about Surveil in this case. Perfectly fine draft filler. 4 mana 3/3 flyer. ETB with a little bit of card selection at common. I'd be perfectly fine picking this up. We saw, was it Cat Owl in Avatar, which was a 3 and a Azorius, 3 and a white or 3 and a blue, for a 3/3 flyer. That didn't have an ETB effect. It had an attack trigger, and that was fine. That was reasonable. I think having this ETB in it being card selection is a lot nicer. Something like Glider Kids from Avatar, which was 1 cheaper for a 2/3, I think was a pretty good pick. A pretty good pick in Avatar for your white decks. This being 1 more, and you get this Surveil, so Surveil is generally a little bit better than Scry. But regardless, you get to sculpt your draws, find your removal, find your land drops, whatever you need from there. So I think this is a pretty reasonable pick for any white-based deck. Interesting that we're dealing with flying merfolk, but whatever. Wanderbrine Preacher is up next for 1 and a white. We have a creature Merfolk Cleric at common. It is a 2/2. Whenever this creature becomes tapped, you gain 2 life. Again, very similar to another card from Avatar. There was Compassionate Healer. Compassionate Healer, I think, is a lot better than this, because Compassionate Healer, when it was tapped, you got to scry. There was a synergy with Waterbending in that set. There's synergy with Convoke in this set. We haven't seen it today, but if you watched yesterday's stream, you will have seen some Convoke cards. We'll probably see a Convoke card later on in the stream. But still, I mean, a bear that anytime that it can get in, gains you life, that's going to, if you're aggressive and you're playing against someone else who's aggressive, you're going to win that race very often. So I think this is fine. It's not like you pack one, pick one or anything like that, but it's perfectly fine to put in your deck. Now catching up with our blue cards, Blossom Bind is up next. For 1 and a blue, we have an enchantment aura at common. Enchant creature. When this aura enters, tap enchanted creature. Enchanted creature can't become untapped, and it can't have any counters put on it. Very important for a pacifism style effect, given that there is blight running around. If you pacify something and they're like, oh, okay, I'm just going to blight this thing, still get some value off of it, then this card would be horrible. But because they can't put any counters on it, they can't use it for any of their own blight synergy. They can certainly sacrifice it if there's any sort of sacrifice stuff going on, same way that you could with a regular pacifism. But this is pretty, I think this is pretty premium removal for blue. It doesn't turn off any activated abilities for this or any triggers that it might have, but we're dealing in limited, right? This is probably going to just hit some vanilla creature to get it out of the way. You can use it offensively. Since it's going to tap their creature, you can obviously use it to get rid of, to lock down their bomb. And for only 2 mana, pretty efficient. So nice blue removal. Glamour Gifter. For 1 and a blue, we have a creature Fairy Wizard at uncommon. It's a 1/2 with flash and flying. And when this creature enters, choose up to 1 other target creature. Until end of turn, that creature has base power and toughness 4/4 and gains all creature types. Very interesting card. Usually you think of something like this as it's going to be like a protection spell, and it kind of works like that. If they're you know, pointing a lightning bolt or a lightning strike, which would be more in line with modern with limited these days, at it, you get to save it because it's going to become a 4/4. And then if you have any other creature type synergy, you get a little bit of synergy on top of there. You can flash it in to as sort of like a pump spell against if your opponent let it through, or pump it up to eat something in combat or trade with something that it normally wouldn't have. You can't do it on itself, so you can't just go, all right, I'm going to flash this in and chump, or not chump block, I'm going to flash this in and surprise block something with a 4/4 for 2. You have to have something else on the battlefield, but still. Pretty reasonable card for limited, I think, given the fact that it has flash. Mostly, I think, using this as a surprise blocker. Or as like a pseudo pump spell. Glamour Gifter. Kolrath Mystic is up next. For 2 and a blue, we have a creature Elemental Wizard at common. It is a 2/4, so 3 mana 2/4. Pretty decent stat line. Whenever you cast a spell with a mana value 4 or greater, this creature gets +2/+0 and gains vigilance until end of turn. So I've been referencing Final Fantasy a lot. There was a mechanic in Final Fantasy that had, if you were casting non-creature spells with mana value 4 or greater, then you got some value off of it. Seems like they're kind of tickling that spot here. Maybe that's the elemental synergy going on here. Here, also important to note that this is just a spell with mana value 4 or greater, rather than non-creature spells with mana value 4 or greater. So any creatures that you have that you cast can pump this up. Kind of feels like Sahagin, but Sahagin was only 2 mana. This is 3 mana, and it doesn't get permanent buff. It's only something for that turn. Probably still going to be fine, but I don't think it's quite as good as what we saw in the Final Fantasy Draft format. Still, 3 mana for 2/4 blocks well. Any turn that you play this on turn 3, turn 4, you play a 4 mana creature, you get to attack in for 4 with Vigilance. That seems perfectly fine. Omni Changeling is up next. For 3 blue, we have a creature Shapeshifter at uncommon. It's a 0/0, which is interesting. It has Changeling, so it's every creature type. It also has Convoke, which we'll get back to in a second. And then you may have this creature enter as a copy of any creature on the battlefield, except it has Changeling. So it's a clone, essentially. So let's go back to Convoke. So this is a returning mechanic. I don't know if it was an original Lorwyn, but it's been something that's even around in current standard with cards like Vote Out. You have Convoke, but it's coming back with a vengeance in this set. What Convoke is for any creatures that you have on the battlefield that are untapped, you can tap them kind of as if they were mana sources. So you can tap those creatures for either generic or for that creature's color. With here, you would need blue creatures to pay for the blue pips here. Otherwise, they would tap for generic, and you can only get up to you can only use up to 3 to help pay for the cost. Very similar to Waterbending, what we saw in the Avatar set, except you don't get access to artifacts, but you do get access to colored pips. So this can, if you have 5 creatures on the battlefield, this can technically be free. 5 mana for a clone. You usually see clones at 4 mana these days. But given the fact that it can be free, and also given the fact a lot of times with clones these days, it's only things on your side. This one can be something on your opponent's side as well. And the fact that even though you're cloning something, you would, if you have any creature type synergies on your side, you would still be able to benefit from them because the thing that you're cloning becomes a changeling. I could see this being pretty good, especially if we are in sort of a bomb heavy format. They often talk about Prince and Pauper formats. When you think of a Prince format, it's more based around your like your high impact uncommons and maybe even your rares. And if you have a format that's like that, then being able to clone your opponent's big bombs means that cards like this go up. If it's very Pauper heavy, if it's very just a lot of common cards that anybody can pick up, you're not going to get that much value from something like a clone. So remains to be seen. You're going to have to look at the format and how it plays out. But I could see this going up or down in value based off of where we end up. Don't really think that this is going to see any standard play, but given the fact that you could play it for free, maybe. 5 mana is a lot, but if I'm thinking, like, I know the Simic decks are playing like Mockingbird already. You being this 5 mana compared to Mockingbird, which is really the exact same mana cost as the thing that you're trying to to copy, but given that this has Convoke, you could theoretically copy it for free, and in your sort of like Badgermole Cubs decks, you're going to get a lot of creatures on the battlefield, so it's going to end up being pretty cheap, but a lot of those creatures are generally mana dorks already, so are you really gaining that much from the fact that it has Convoke? I'm going to say it probably is not going to be a standard player, but again, could see play in limited based on whether we're dealing with a Prince or a Pauper format. Runaway Together is up next. This is a reprint from several sets that are even currently in standard. For one and a blue, we have an instant at common. This says choose 2 creatures controlled by different players. Return those creatures to their owner's hands. I don't think I've played in. Well, no, that's wrong. I did play during Throne of Eldraine, but I didn't play that much of Draft during Throne of Eldraine. So I don't know exactly how good Runaway Together has been. I would think that it's fine, especially at having instant speed interaction. You get to bounce something of yours. Maybe you get some ETB trigger off of there. I guess the main problem is that you have to have something on your side of the board. If your opponent interacts with, actually, I need to see the ruling on this because it's been, like I said, I haven't really played this. So let's see. Runaway Together. Do they have any rulings? So the ruling says if one of the 2 target creatures becomes an illegal target, Runaway Together can still determine its controller only to check whether the other creature is a legal target. If the illegal target has left the battlefield, use its last known information. If the other creature is still a legal target, it will be returned to its owner's hand. If somebody steals the creature in response, then both targets become illegal and the spell doesn't resolve. Sure. Oh, it's just repeating the ruling based off of the last 2 times it was printed. So yeah, I think what that's saying is even if they remove the creature on your side, or maybe bounce their own creature on their side, if you're trying to like regain some ETB effect, then Runaway Together would still resolve and still return the remaining creature to your hand, or to its owner's hand. I think it's probably fine. I don't know if it's going to be as good as the blue pacifism, which is the same color, the same mana value to kind of straight up remove the creature. It's really only going to be there if you've got. It's really only going to get better than that card if you've got your own sort of ETB value from replaying your card. Silvergill Peddler for 2 and a blue. We have a creature, Merfolk Citizen, at common. It is a 2/3, so a 3 mana 2/3, a little on the weak side. Whenever this creature becomes tapped, so important, we just saw a couple cards with Convoke. That's a way to tap your creatures without putting them into combat. So whenever this creature becomes tapped, draw a card, then discard a card. 3 mana, a little on the expensive side for that effect, but you are getting a 2/3 with this effect. and then a really good convoke helper, because you get to convoke you get to use it to convoke something out and get to filter your hand a little bit. Probably going to be okay. I don't think you're going to really. Well, I guess also, even if you can't convoke with it, anytime that you attack, you get to filter your hand. So maybe it's a little bit better than I'm thinking. Just being able to attack, sculpt your hand, sculpt your draws. The big issue is it's a 2/3 for 2, which is not really where you want to be for stat lines, but getting that loot in immediately seems like it could be fine. I think our first rare that we've seen today of the catching up cards, Sunderflock for 7 blue. We have a creature elemental at rare. It is a 5/5 that says this spell costs X less to cast, where X is the greatest mana value among elementals you control. It has flying, and when this creature enters, if you cast it, return all non-elemental creatures to their owner's hands. So the if you cast it part is so that you don't get that extra value from reanimating it, but given the fact that you're getting a lot of mana off of this, depending on if you have other elementals in play, you probably will be able to cast it a reasonable amount of time in a deck designed to benefit from this. Let's see. If I paid 5 mana for ETB Summon Leviathan, that would be pretty good. It's not quite the same as Summon Leviathan because in Final Fantasy Limited, it was really just like Leviathan and the Sahagins that were reasonable creatures that your opponent could have that would not be bounced by some Leviathan's ETB. From a limited perspective with Sunderflock, any changelings are not getting bounced. Any element, if they're also on elementals, those are not getting bounced. It's really going to be only like insane in scenarios where you're facing against somebody who is all straight up elves or straight up goblins, something like that. Even if you only get a couple, maybe like if I did this and it bounced none of my things but one of my opponent's things for 5, I think I would still be happy with that. My opponent has to recast it if they wanted to get back on the battlefield. And then I've still got a 5/5 flyer, which is going to rule the skies, get over the top in the game pretty quickly. If this was my only elemental in my deck, other than like changelings, let's say other than like token changelings, let's say I have some elementals, but they don't have any mana value. Also important to note that this is among elementals, not elemental creatures. So if you have a kindred spell, a kindred enchantment, or something like that, that is an elemental, then it would count that as well. For its mana reduction, I should say. If this ended up bouncing some of my own creatures, let's say 5 mana bounced one of mine and one of my opponents, I think it would still be great. because you still have this 5/5 flyer, even at 5 mana. I think it's still fine if you, and given the fact that you can just play an elemental deck and you go like a 3-drop that makes this 4 mana, a 4-drop that makes this 3 mana. You could double spell, maybe even play this, bounce everything, including one of your, including like a 2-drop of yours, and just be able to play this immediately on turn 5. Play it back immediately on turn 5, I should say. Yeah, I think this is going to be extremely good and limited. I don't really think that it's going to be all that great in constructed. Whenever I see this, you know, if you cast it stuff, you kind of think to the Superior Spider-Man deck, which is doing okay, kind of tier 1, 1.5-ish, but I wouldn't say is the best deck in the format. Would I put in one of these as just like a tech card or a cute card to bring in? I don't think so, because I think you get a lot of the same value from both Meringue River Regent, which some versions of that deck already play, guarantee bouncing 2 things, plus getting your creature, getting the 6/7, or I guess it would be a 4/4 if you were doing it with Superior Spider-Man, but guarantee bouncing one of the 2 things of your opponents often is similar, and the value of the Meringue River Regent being able to coil and catch and put your Bringer of the Last Gift into your graveyard kind of goes over this. And then if you're just thinking about this as sort of like a mass pseudo board wipe, well, Bringer of the Last Gift is mass actual board wipe. So yeah, I don't really think that this is going to see much standard play, but I think it's pretty darn good in limited. So, Sunderflock. Swat Away is up next. For 2 blue, we have an instant and uncommon. It says this spell costs 2 generic less to cast if a creature is attacking you. Very interesting wording. We're going to have to come back to that. The owner of target spell or creature puts it on their choice of the top or bottom of their library. So very similar to like a card like Eject or Into the Royal, a kicked Into the Royal. Well, I guess Into the Royal goes into your hand. Similar to Eject, really, from Final Fantasy. This put it on the top or the bottom of your opponent's library. Totally Lost Days from Avatar, stuff like that. Way better than putting it into your opponent's hand, because you're either basically removing it if your opponent decides to go, okay, I'm going to put it on the bottom of my library. It's the thing is basically gone. Or if they're like, this is important enough to me, I'm going to put it on the top. That could be bad, because it might be that they actually needed to draw something else to deal with to deal with the board state that you're going to present to them next turn, and now they have this guaranteed whiff from the creature that they decided to keep on top of their deck. Important thing here. It also says target spell. So you can use this. This is a counter spell for 4 mana. If your opponent, this is going to be something that, especially in limited, that you're going to have to be very cognizant of, because if you're playing flash creatures, if you're playing pump spells, if you're playing anything, any sort of instant speed stuff, you need to be aware that you really want to, it's not going to be great for you to do that after attackers have been declared, during combat, because you make your opponents, if they happen to have a swat away in hand, you make that 2 cheaper. It's not, a lot of the ways that these cards are worded, something like a ride down, I think is what it was called from Aether Drift, it gets cheaper if it is targeting an attacking creature or targeting a tapped creature or something like that. This it's cheaper regardless of what it's targeting. Just if you're being attacked by something, it's going to get cheaper. So if you go, okay, I attack, all right, flash in this thing, flash in that fairy that gave +4/+4. Now, if your opponent was only holding up 2 mana, now you turned on their swat away. They get to bounce the thing. They get to either bounce the fairy or bounce the actual creature. When they otherwise wouldn't have been able to. So something given that this is uncommon, it's not going to be something that you see all the time, but it is something that you're going to have to keep in mind when playing in Limited. I don't think this is constructed viable. 4 mana is way too expensive for a counterspell, but I think this is pretty good in Limited. Both being a counterspell and a removal spell. At 4 mana, eject, you get to draw a card, but even other versions of that effect have been playable just at 4 mana. And this you get way more out of it. So yeah, I think this is pretty playable in Limited. Temporal Cleansing is up next. For 3 and a blue, we have a sorcery at common. It has Convoke. And the owner of target non-land permanent puts it into their library, second from the top or on the bottom. This is basically the exact same spell as Swat Away, except it's sorcery speed, but you can convoke it. And if your opponent decides to put it on the top of their library, it's second from the top. So if they really wanted to keep that thing, because it's their big bomb or whatever have you, then they either have to have some way to draw an extra card, or they have to wait a whole extra turn before they get access to that thing again. Sorcery speed obviously makes this a lot worse than an instant speed version of this effect. We saw Lost Days was very, very good in Avatar Limited. Here, I think this is still going to be fine, given the fact that you can convoke with it. So you get to play something, play a creature, and then still cast this for relatively cheap. That's something I didn't bring up when I talked about convoke. Very similar to waterbending in Avatar. When you're convoking something, even if it has summoning sickness, it's not tapping itself, like going into combat or using an activated ability to tap itself. Something else is tapping it, so you can tap it on the turn that you played it for the convoke cost. So keep that in mind. Unwelcome Sprite is up next. For 1 and a blue, we have a creature Fairy Rogue at uncommon. It is a 2/1 with flying, and whenever you cast a spell during your opponent's turn, surveil 2. So very straightforward. This is a very good card in control, in a limited control deck. You drop this on turn 2. It's a 2/1 flyer. It's not like going to completely win the game or anything very quickly, but it's going to put enough pressure onto your opponent. And then you get to sit there and hold up some amount of mana, counter their stuff, interact with their stuff, and sculpt your draws so that you're continuing to hit your interaction spells, continuing to advance your board, your gameplay. with this 2-mana 2/1 flyer. So I think a very good card in limited. We haven't seen a ton of fairies, so I think that this cast during your opponent's turn is the fairy mechanic of the set, but I haven't seen enough fairies to know if that's the main mechanic. But I think a pretty good limited control card. Not really going to see standard play. It's got, I should say, there's a world where somebody might want to try this out in something like a Dimir midrange deck, right? You're often holding up your mana to interact with your opponents. Cast this just says cast a spell. It doesn't say cast an instant or sorcery or anything like that. So your Flood Pits Drowners, your Malcolms, whatever have you, that you flash in, or your removal spells that you play can trigger the Unwelcome Sprite. I don't think that it's better than I already waxed poetic about Sig last stream. I don't think it's better than that, and I don't think that it's likely better than anything that currently exists in Dimir midrange, but you could... There's a world where somebody puts up a 5-0 list on MTGO with Dimir midrange playing like one copy of this, and they'll be like, and people will be like, "Oh, nice innovation." So yeah. Wanderwine Distractor. For 3 and a blue, we have a creature, Merfolk Wizard. That's very interesting. I didn't point it out. I thought about it, but I didn't fully point it out when we saw this earlier. These Wanderwine versions of Merfolk are really catfishy looking, really ugly looking. This might be the Morning Tide, or sorry, the Shadow Moor half of Merfolk. Anyways, back to the actual card. Wanderwine Distractor, 3 and a blue for creature Merfolk Wizard at common. It is a 4/3, 3-mana 4/3, okay stat line. Whenever this creature becomes tapped, target creature an opponent controls gets -3/-0 until end of turn. I think this is great. Aggressively, it's a 4/3, but you're giving -3/-0 to something. So you just attack with this, shrink down your opponent's best blocker. They either have to gang block to get rid of this, or they're just blocks are not that profitable anymore. Over and over and over. This seems great. It's not like, it's certainly something that you can do some Convoke shenanigans with. If you've got instant speed Convoke, you can cast that spell, Convoke with this during attacks, before blockers, tap this thing, or maybe even block and then tap this thing to the Convoke to shrink the thing that you're blocking, so that you kill it but you don't die. So there's some fun shenanigans you can do with something like that, but even just like sort of the base case of, here's a 4-drop that can attack and make it so that your blocks are way, way worse, over and over and over again for free, seems pretty fine. I think this is a pretty premium common. Now we're through all the blue, on to our first catch-up black card that was revealed today. Vile Boggart. For a single black, we have a Goblin Assassin at common. It is a 1/1 that says when this creature dies, put a -1/-1 counter on up to 1 target creature. I think generally these cards are decent in limited. There's a lot of, there's like Shambling Ghast is the big one that I remember. But this type of card has been featured a lot. It blocks, it trades up against 2 toughness creatures, which is generally going to be creatures that cost more than 1 mana, so you're getting a little bit of extra mana value out of your Vile Boggart. But also this is putting an actual -1/-1 counter. Often with creatures like Shambling Ghast or whatnot, it's just -1/-1 until end of turn. So it's really, okay, I block this, I try to get rid of, maybe my opponent has some 1 toughness thing that they left back, or I trade it into a 2 toughness thing and kill it off. Here, generally, that's still what you're going to want to do with a card like this, but you could just use this to basically permanently shrink something of your opponents if they've got something that otherwise trades up against your big creatures. You get to shrink it down, and now it becomes a lot less. It does also say on up to 1 target creature. So again, somebody has to really show me the value of this, but they obviously think that it's something that you can build around with goblins. You could put the -1/-1 counter on one of your own things. And so if you have anything that gets value from removing counters, well, there you go. That's probably like way, way, way out there as far as things that you would do with this, but it doesn't say on a creature you don't control, so it is something that you can do. But yeah, I think this is fine. Usually one drops, not that great in limited, but something that can trade up, perfectly fine. Very similar to like a Death Toucher, perfectly fine. If you can use this to trade up. Bloodline Bidding for 6 black. We have a sorcery at rare that has Convoke. It says choose a creature type. Return all creature cards of the chosen type from your graveyard to the battlefield. This is a weird card. It's 8 mana, but it has Convoke. But if you have enough things to realistically cast this for, I think 5 is for 5 mana. That means you already have 3 creatures on the battlefield. The likely scenario is either the game's too early, so there isn't really much in your graveyard, or you're already in a good enough position. Do you really need to cast this? I should say, I know that elves, though we haven't seen a ton of elves because we haven't seen that much green, but I do know that elves mechanic seems to be the typical Golgari mechanic of self-mill. So in that scenario, if you're able to turbocharge your graveyard, then something like a Bloodline Bidding, you just have a bunch of little idiots that you just played to self-mill that had ETB self-mill on them, and then you get the Bloodline Bidding and bring back a bunch of extra stuff. But outside of that sort of graveyard synergy stuff going on, I think that this is probably a card that is going to underperform, but be drafted higher than it should be. You also just have to realize that a lot of the times, this is from a limited perspective, obviously, a lot of the times, even in a, creature synergy, tribal synergy heavy format, you're drafting. It's not like you can guarantee that every creature that you have in your deck is going to be of one particular type. So you might be in this weird scenario of, okay, I've got a bunch of creatures in my graveyard, but the best that I can get is like 2 creatures back for at most 8 mana. It'll still probably be fine. Still probably be pretty good in limited. But you do need to keep those things in mind. As far as standard goes, I don't really know. The heavy graveyard synergy decks, your Orzhov sacrifice decks, and your like Golgari Roots or Golgari Beifong decks, they're not very creature type centric. So I don't think that any of those would really do something. Maybe if there ends up being enough elf support, because there are some decent elves in Foundations, some decent elf lords and elf synergy creatures in Foundations, that maybe if there's some sort of Golgari elf deck, this could end up being fine in. But I think I'm kind of stretching. To me, this is mostly a commander card and can work out pretty well in limited, but not. I don't know if this is going to be like absolutely disgusting in limited. Dawnhand Eulogist is up next. For 3 and a black, we have a creature Elf Warlock at common. It is a 3/3 with Menace. Whenever this creature enters, mill 3 cards, like I just talked about. There's elves with mill. Then if there is an elf card in your graveyard, each opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. Pretty good. If elves look like they want some graveyard synergy, this is a graveyard synergy enabler and a payoff in one. It's only a one-shot payoff, but you still get some payoff of, hey, you milled some stuff over. Either you milled over an elf or there was already an elf in your graveyard. Boom. Your opponent loses 2, you gain 2. Not that anybody would ever do this, but should keep in mind that if your opponent plays this, its trigger enters the stack, and you're just itching to use the removal in your hand, let the trigger resolve. Because otherwise, you shoot this, and if it's not exile-based removal, then you've just guaranteed them to have an elf in their graveyard for the second half of the trigger. So, not that anybody would ever do this, but do keep it in mind. Grub, Storied Matriarch. This is our goblin version of one of these flip cards. For 2 and a black, we have a legendary creature, Goblin Warlock. It is a 2/1 with Menace, so a little on the weak side for stat-wise, but it does have evasion. Whenever this creature enters or transforms into Grub, Storied Matriarch, return up to 1 target goblin card from your graveyard to your hand. Important to say that it says goblin, not goblin creature. So all the kindred cards that we've seen before, you could bring it back with Grub. And then at the beginning of your first main phase, you may pay a single red. If you do, transform Grub. So a 3 mana 2/1 ETB, most often ETB Gravedigger. ETB Raised Dead, but you can pick up a crib swap. You could pick up some other kindred card with this. I think a little on the weak side. 3 mana is a lot for such a weak body. It is nice that every time that you flip back onto this side, you get to do it again. But that's always assuming that you're getting all that extra time with this card in play. Really mostly need to think about it as, what can this do for me immediately? ETB, bring back a goblin, and a 2/1 Menace. I think a little on the weak side. There is some goblin synergy Stadium Headliner is a goblin, and that's actually a goblin that you can guarantee to get into your graveyard because it has its sacrifice trigger, or sacrifice activated ability, I should say. Same with things like I can't remember the name of the card. It's in Foundations. It's a reprint. It's for a single red. It's a hasty goblin that you can tap, sack it to deal 1 damage to any target. Those are things that you could, even if you're just curving into grub, those are things that you could guarantee to be in your graveyard without milling things over or hoping that your opponent has your opponent decided to remove them. Plus all the other goblin synergies of House Squad Heavy, Krenko, there's the Riot Goblin, the 2/1 that if you attack this turn on your end step, create a 1/1 goblin token. So there are some goblin stuff in the format. So still think it's a little on the weak side, but there's some stuff going on. What's the backside? So you paid 4 mana total over 2 turns. Two a black and a red. Turns into Grub Notorious Auntie. Another legendary creature, Goblin Warrior. It's a 2/1. Still a 2/1 with Menace. Whenever Grub attacks, you may blight 1. If you do, create a tapped and attacking copy that's a copy of the blighted creature, except it has at the beginning of the end step, sacrifice this token. That's pretty powerful. And then it has the ability to pay black to flip it back over. That's pretty powerful. Your sort of Kiki Jiki reflection of Kiki Jiki style effect. You do have to throw Grub into battle. But you don't have to throw the blighted creature into battle. You're throwing the copy of the blighted creature. And I imagine, I don't know for certain, but I don't think that when it's a copy of the blighted creature, I don't think that the copy is blighted. I think that the copy is the original, the fully powered version. It's not going to come copied with a -1/-1 counter on it. Given the fact that she has Menace, it does mean you're more likely to be able to get in with Grub unscathed, even though you paid 3 mana for a 2/1. There's certainly a world. You go turn 3 Grub, turn 4 flip Grub, land House Squad Heavy, attack, blight the House Squad Heavy, create an extra copy of the House Squad Heavy. You have 2 Lords that are both going to, I think, trigger on instep to create a 1/1 Goblin. I don't remember the there's something. No. House Squad Heavy is max speed. So you won't really be able to get the max speed from House Squad Heavy, but from the token copy. But it is just a Lord at the end of the day. So you do get a little pump from that. It is power and toughness, right? Or is it just giving it haste? Let me double check. House Squad Heavy. I know there's like drop. Oh, it's just haste, and it's the beginning of combat on your turn. Create a goblin, so you're not gonna be able to get the extra token. Drop kick bomber. Yeah, drop kick bomber is the Lord that's in Foundations. Other goblins you control get +1/+1, and you can pay a red to give another target goblin you control flying. That gets sacrificed on whenever it deals combat damage. There's a world where I think that you could, that Grub could get the job done, given how powerful this back half is. But you got to get to the back half, which is a little bit harder. But you do get the ETB Gravedigger effect. I think if something like Tarfire gets reprinted, then I think Grub becomes significantly better, because Tarfire is a creature shock that was Kindred Goblin, and that would be incredible, because then you could use that shock proactively early and then Grub to pick it back up. Are they going to do that? We don't know. But if that happens, fantastic. So wait and see on the constructed playability of Grub. Limited playability, think it's fine. Pretty good in the Goblin deck. You get to throw your big idiots, throw free big idiots at your opponent. For as long as that creature is not blighted to death. And then obviously at any point in the game, you bring this back. Oh, and I guess at any point, even if you blight that thing to death, you could decide to flip it back over, and if it was a goblin, you get to pick it back up with Grub on the flip and replay it. So yeah, I think Grub's pretty good and limited, and has potential in a goblin deck in standard. Gut Splitter Gang is up next. For 3 and a black, we have a creature, Goblin Berserker at uncommon. It is a 6/6 for 4, so way overstated. At the beginning of your first main phase, you may blight 2. If you don't, you lose 3 life. So this is the definition of Suicide Black. Pretty weak in, I don't think it's going to see any play in standard, but great for the top end of a highly aggressive black deck. You just go, I'm not going to, I don't care about my life total. Here's a 6/6. Have fun. And just crush in on your opponent. Yeah. Card seems great in limited. For an aggressive deck. Not quite there for standard. Heirloom Auntie for 2 and a black. We have a creature, Goblin Warlock at common. It is a 4/4 that enters with 2 -1/-1 counters on it. So it's a gray ogre. 3 mana for a 2/2. Whenever another creature you control dies, surveil 1, then remove a -1/-1 counter from this creature. So even after you run out of -1/-1 counters on this creature, you still get the surveil triggers on death. So that's interesting to point out. And it's not specifically Goblin Synergy. It's just any creature that you have dies. It does have to be you control. Still 3 mana for a 2/2, not really where you want to be. And I don't know if we've seen a lot of sacrifice stuff. We've seen a lot of blight, which is certainly another way that you can pseudo do sacrifice stuff there. And I guess at that point, this is a decent blight target itself, because it can start shrugging off the blight counters, the -1/-1 counters that you added onto it, just through its own machinations. It'll be interesting to see. 3 mana for, the biggest thing is it's 3 mana for a 2/2. And if you can't get any of the synergy going, then it's 3 mana for a 2/2. But if you have all the synergy pieces, this becomes a lot better. You get to sculpt your hand, you get to fuel your graveyard, you get all sorts of fun stuff. and obviously not a player in standard. Even in some kind of sacrifice shell, you've got the 2-drop that sacrifices to surveil. It's doing everything that you want that this card does, but also being your sack outlet. Requiting or requiting? I think I'm going to say requiting Hex. For a single black, we have an instant at uncommon. As initial cost to cast this spell, you may blight 1. Destroy target creature with mana value 2 or less. If the spell's additional cost was paid, you gain 2 life. Oh, we needed this card. It's not like the greatest card in the world. It is not. It's Fatal Push at home. But it's still pretty good, and it's still something that we desperately needed for standard. I talked about this a lot when we looked at Spell Snare yesterday. And if you ever watch Doomwake, a Magic the Gathering streamer and YouTuber, he talks a lot about how the pace of the threats for standard have grown and grown and grown, so that if you just look at standards, ships passing in the night because your threats are so good and so cheap, and your answers don't match up that well. You're either paying the same mana value for something that's giving them 2 maps, or you're paying more than what they paid for it, and like you I still can't remember the name of the spell. You give your opponent, you shoot the thing, give your opponent 2 maps against their Badgermole Cub, and they still have a 1/1 land, and they just got two maps that they can use later to pump up their Herboroid, or try and find their land drop, or whatever have you. This is so good for standard. You're like Dimir or your black-based decks, they're having to play either like Tragic Trajectory, which was 1 mana, -2/-2, or if you triggered Void, -10/-10, but it was sorcery speed, or they had to play Stab, which was 1 mana, -2/-2 at instant speed. Here, I can just kill anything with mana value 2 or less for 1 mana. I don't have to worry about, I can kill an Azure Beastbinder. I can kill the Frenzied Baloth. I can kill an active Scavenging Ooze, or Keen-Eyed Curator, or Fear of Missing Out, or Rescue Beastie. Just all these things that I couldn't kill with Stab, or most of the time couldn't kill with Tragic Trajectory, that I now have a good answer for. This is going right into, I think, everyone's Dimir decks. They're just getting rid of those Tragic Trajectories and Stabs, and just playing copies of this. And I think it's gonna help. It's not enough to stop the onslaught, but it's gonna help quite a bit. So yeah, Requiting Hex, and obviously pretty good in limited. It might not be that. It might just be okay in limited. It's uncommon, so you're not going to see a ton of it, and it's only going to hit 2 mana value or less. A lot of times you in limited, the curves end up being a lot higher, so it'll end up just being fine in limited, but it's going to be much better in standard. Shimmer Creep is up next for 4 and a black. We have a creature elemental at uncommon. It is a 3/5 with menace, and this is our first instance of Vivid today. Vivid is whenever this creature enters, it's going to do something based off of the number of colors among permanents you control. In this case, you would drain your opponent for X, and you would gain X, where X is that number of colors among permanents you control. If you are mono black, or if this is your only permanent that you get onto the battlefield by casting this, you would drain for 1, because this itself is black. But if you've got a lot, which elementals seem to be, they're wanting to be like all 5 colors. Probably, I think they might mostly be red-blue, but we've seen enough of them in other colors, and I think given that they are vivid, you get a little bit, you'll have some incentive to try and go 5 color with elementals, and that's how you're going to get your best value out of this. I think you'd like to be, if you paid 5 mana for a 3/5 menace that drained 2, I still don't know if I'm that happy about that. I think you really need to drain like 3, so I think you probably need to be at least 3 color in order for this to really work for you. Important thing to note, even if you have, you know, other sources of color, other lands other than swamps, those are colorless, regardless of whether they tap for a forest or a swamp, or tap for green mana or black mana or whatever, right? Those permanents themselves are colorless unless there's something else that is giving it color. So again, if you have an empty board and you play this, you would, regardless of whether you have all 5 colors in your mana base, you would just drain them for 1. And I'm obviously not a standard player, way too expensive for a fairly mediocre effect. This is not Grey Merchant of Asphodel. There's an upper limit on this. There aren't more than 5 colors in Magic. This is not the second coming of Gary. And we're to red. So this is where we left off last stream, and we're already almost at 2 hours. I guess an hour and a half so far. So we got to keep moving if we want to eat into this these red cards, so that we don't have an extremely long set of streams at the end of the week. So Ashling Rekindled is our red flip version of these creatures. For 1 on a red, we have a 1/3 legendary creature elemental sorcerer at rare, and whenever this creature enters or transforms into this side, you may discard a card. If you do, draw a card. And then at the beginning of your first main phase, you may have a blue to flip it. As always, like to look at it on the front half first. Basically worse than Fear of Missing Out in every way. You only get the card draw if you have a card to discard, whereas Fear of Missing Out, even if your hand was empty, you would get to draw. The body's worse, and at least the front half doesn't have any additional ability. You can also compare it very similarly to something like Inti. Sure, Inti doesn't have an ETB, but Inti has a repeatable trigger that also grows your team. This is pretty weak. There's going to be need to be a lot of heavy lifting, in my opinion, on the backside for this to be that playable. So at the cost of 3 total mana across 2 turns, being a 1/3 does mean that even though this is a 2-drop, it's gonna dodge your firebending lessons and your shocks and stuff like that to survive. Likely to your next first main. So that's good, but still, we're gonna need to see a lot. So you get all the way to turn 3. You have a blue. You flip this. Now you can only play another two mana spell. But what does it flip into? It flips into Ashling Rime-Bound, which is still a 1/3. Doesn't gain any flying or anything like that. And when it transforms into Ashling Rime-Bound, and at the beginning of your first main phase, so interesting. This is something that just is going to constantly trigger if you leave it on this side. Add 2 mana of any one color. Spend this mana only to cast spells with mana value 4 or greater. All right, the backside. It's essentially ramp for if you go turn 2, Ashling, turn 3, pay 1, get the immediate rebate on this. You drop your land. You can play a 4 mana spell on that turn because you're gonna have you had 3. You just drop your 3rd land. You have 2 extra mana floating from Ashling plus the 2 untapped mana that you have available to you, so you can play a 4-drop. You do have to spend this mana on large-ish spells, so I don't really see this in really the same decks that you're going to be playing Fear of Missing Out in. You're not really going to see this in any sort of lesson strategy or anything like that. This is, to me, this is more for like your Teamer Landfall or like big mana stuff. But constantly getting that extra mana, and then the next turn, if you leave it on this side, you suddenly went from you're now at 6 total mana available to you on turn 4, which is kind of similar to what you get with well, yeah, no, it's still ahead of the curve for a lot of what is available in Standard, outside of the bustedness that is Badger Mole Cub. But there's a world where this can see some play. I think its biggest issue is going to be that Badger Mole Cub issue. But being able to go turn 3, 4-drop, like maybe you discarded a Esper Origins, and then you get to flash back an Esper Origins. In that case, it would be turn 4, 8-drop, which is very, very nice. But it's to say in some other scenario, you play some 4-drop, and then I think the Dragonback Assault is 6 mana. Dragonback Assault. Yeah, that's 6 mana. I could certainly see this seeing play in that type of deck. Sure, you're killing off Ashling at that point, but you already got the card that you wanted in play, and you probably swept your opponent's board. So yeah, I could see it in that specific deck. Anything outside of that, I think you're probably just wanting to do Badger Mole Cub stuff. And even in that deck, there's a lot of value from Earthbending. So maybe I'm trying to think too hard and just Badgermole Cub eats this card's lunch. But it's certainly powerful of a card. Limited, probably pretty good. 2 mana, filter your hand. You're almost certainly going to leave it on the backside as well in limited. And just go bomb into bomb into bomb. You're an elemental deck. Which we saw there seems to be some synergies around 4 or greater mana value spells being cast. So yeah, probably pretty good in limited. Only okay, only possibly okay in standard, and probably just gets outshined by the terror of Badgermole Cub. Bone Club Berserker for 3 and a red. We have a creature Goblin Berserker at common. It's a 2/4 with this creature gets +2/+0 for each other goblin you control. That fella can hit. It doesn't have trample or menace or anything like that. So it can just be chumped to death unless you can somehow give it trample or menace or some sort of evasion. But this can certainly hit hard. You're never going to play this in a non-goblin deck in limited. If you only have one other goblin out, then 4 mana for a 4/4, that's still pretty bad. You kind of need like 2 goblins out. And you also need to keep in mind that if you have like a relatively weak goblin out and you go to attack with this and your opponent just points some cheap removal at the weak goblin, then this immediately shrinks and maybe they can block it easy or block it easier or maybe even profitably block it and eat it. So don't think that this card's that great. Really is only going to work in like a highly aggressive goblin deck. Plus you have a way to give it trample or some kind of evasion. Burning Curiosity is up next for 2 and a red. We have a sorcery at common. It says it has additional cost to cast this spell. You may blight 1. Exile the top 2 cards of your library. If the spell's additional cost was paid, exile the top 3 cards instead. Until the end of your next turn, you may play those cards. So, Impulse Draw effect. 3 mana is a little on the expensive side for a lot of these Impulse Draw effects. Opera Love Song was 2 mana. Rin's Resolve was 2 mana. Grab the Prize wasn't Impulse Draw. It was that was a Tormenting Voice. 3 mana for just grab 2. You do get access to these cards all the way through to your next turn. So you play this on turn 3, or you play this on turn 4. Given the fact that you can get access to them all the time, you can even play this on turn 3, and if one of the cards is a land, you'll still have the ability to play it out of exile on your next turn. The whole Blight one to get a 3rd card, like, it's nice that you're drawing a little bit deeper, but you're not actually drawing them. You'll eventually run out of time to use them. So later in the game, sure, this becomes an actual draw 3, but early you're kind of just wanting to do this as a straight up divination, because it's unless your curve is very, very low, it's unlikely that you're going to be able to play all those cards before they get exiled permanently. So I think in the late game, this becomes pretty good. Early game, it's pretty medium to even bad. Certainly not constructed viable. And in limited, yeah, if you're controlling, I think this can be pretty good, because late enough, you're gonna have enough mana to play this and play a land plus a spell and still have access to the third one your next turn. So 3 mana, draw 3, that's pretty good in that scenario. But again, not great early, where you're probably going to want to just do the 3 mana, draw 2. And if you're just doing that, it's a little more expensive than what we've seen for this type of effect in the past. Collective Inferno, 3 red for an enchantment that at rare that has Convoke. Interesting. As this enchantment enters, choose a creature type. Double all damage that sources you control of the chosen type would deal. So we saw a card very similar to this in Faded Firepower, which I think I valued pretty low, but ended up being a lot better in limited than I initially thought of it. I didn't really think that you'd be able to, even with firebending, I didn't really think that you could go that off with Faded Firepower. But it ended up being a nice little one-shot kill that you could just get some free wins off of in limited. Here, you don't got any flash on this, so it's going to be a lot worse. You can basically play it for free, but you could, with Faded Firepower, you also could basically play it for free if you had enough firebending mana. And this only specifically deals with creatures. Sure, it's doubling their damage, whereas something like Faded Firepower, you're only adding additional damage based on the number of counters that you could put onto the Faded Firepower. And sure, you can technically play this for free or very cheap with Convoking, but in that scenario, you're convoking this out and then giving your opponent... If you're convoking this out, you're giving your opponent all the time in the world to figure out a way around it, because you didn't attack them with those creatures that convoked, unless they happen to have vigilance. And you're also leaving yourself a lot more open. And again, you might not have a entirely single creature type deck. So this ends up being not being able to hit everything that you have. So I think this is pretty on the weak side for limited, and certainly not playable and constructed. Elder Auntie is up next for 2 and a red. We have a creature Goblin Warlock at common. It's a 2/2. So again, another Grey Ogre. When this enters, create a 1/1 black and red Goblin creature token. Seen this type of card a ton. It's perfectly fine, especially given the fact that we've got Blight. Kind of is creepy that your mom gives the kid over to Auntie, and then Auntie blights the kid to death. But for Magic gameplay reasons, pretty good. Giving more targets to blight onto to get that extra value. Explosive Prodigy for 1 and a red. We have a creature Elemental Sorcerer at uncommon. It is a 1/1. It has, when this creature enters, it deals X damage to target creature an opponent controls, where X is the number of colors among permanents you control. I think this card's great. Well, hold on. It's okay. Let me back up a little bit. It's just a 1/1 with no ways to boost it up. It's like the cheapest FTK you've seen, and it can trade up very, very nicely if you're able to do a full-on Vivid thing. 2 mana to deal 5 to something. That's great. 2 mana to get a 1/1 and deal 1 to something of your opponents. You play this on turn 2. That's certainly good. Beyond that, I'm trying to think like sort of your middle ground-ish area. So, worst case scenario, late game, you draw this. You don't have a board. You play this. 2 mana, deal 1, have a 1/1. Probably pretty on the weak side. But a more realistic scenario is you probably have, you know, some number of idiots lying around. 2 mana, deal 3. 2 mana, deal 2 to something. Probably gets rid of something on your opponent's board. I think you're really looking for at least to deal 3, because then it's basically sorcery speed removal. Pretty good sorcery speed removal. But if you can't get to that point, your best bet is to have this immediately on turn 2 and deal with your opponent's 1-drop or 2-drop with 1 power. Does get a little awkward if you're on the play and your opponent has no 2-drop, but they have a 3-drop. I think you really need to be playing into the Vivid stuff. You can't really do if you're not getting at least 2, probably you need 3, then it's unplayable. But once you get to 3, it gets fine. You have it there, it's something to eat a blight, it's something to chump block with, and you got to remove something. So yeah. Explosive Prodigy. Not going to see any play in Standard. Flame Chain Mauler is up next for 1 and a red. We have a creature Elemental Warrior at common. It is a 2/2, so we got a bear. And then for 1 and a red, this creature gets +1/+0 and gains menace until end of turn. I mean, this is pretty curve fillery, something to sink your mana into late game to get in an evasive threat. Threaten to deal a lot more damage with it if you're top decking with your opponent. Perfectly fine. Perfectly fine card. Not a high pick, but you're fine putting this into your deck, I think. Flame Braider is up next for 1 and a red. We have a creature Elemental Bard at uncommon. It's another 2/2, so another bear. And then tap to add 2 mana in any combination of colors. Spend this mana only to cast elemental spells or activate abilities of elemental sources. Again, it doesn't say elemental creature spells, it just says elemental spells and elemental sources. So any kindred spells that you have that are elementals or are changeling, or you can use this for that. And I think it's pretty good. We've seen that it seems like the theme of elementals in Limited is 4+. You do this on turn 2. You can play a 5-drop, an elemental 5-drop on turn 3, and that's going to put you way ahead of your opponent. So yeah, I think this card's great. Possibly first pickable as an uncommon. Yeah, certainly. This card just seems great. And even as a body, it's perfectly fine. If you don't have anything to play, it's a bear, you get in, trades with a lot of the stuff that your opponents have. Perfectly fine. Goat Nap. This is actually a reprint from one of the Modern Horizons sets. For 2 and a red, we have a sorcery at uncommon. Gain control of target creature until end of turn. Untap that creature. It gains haste until end of turn. If that creature is a goat, it also gets +3/+0 until end of turn. 99% of the time, this is just act of treason or threaten. I don't know if I've actually seen... Well, I shouldn't say that. I haven't seen anything that's specifically been creature type goat. But there are changelings in the set. And all those changelings are goats. And so that actually makes me think that this was from Modern Horizons 1. Because I think Modern Horizons 1's limited environment kind of worked around changelings. Because there was the black 1-drop changeling that had unblockable that people like from Modern Horizons 1. So, Goat Nap. Goliath Daydreamer is up next. For 2 red, we have a creature Giant Wizard at rare. It is a 4/4. It says whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell from your hand, exile that card with a dream counter on it instead of putting it into your graveyard as it resolves. Whenever this creature attacks, you may cast a spell from among cards you own in exile with dream counters on them without paying its mana cost. Seems really slow. 4 mana for a 4/4, very square body, with no ETB effect. You then need to untap, cast an instant or sorcery. I guess if you get to your next turn, you can cast something on your first main for like 4 or 5 mana or whatever. Cast something on your first main, and then attack with Goliath Daydreamer and cast it again immediately. That's like your best case scenario, almost certainly. And because it's part of the attack trigger, even if it's a sorcery that you're bringing back, that you're recasting, you still get to cast it at instant speed as part of the resolution of the effect. So, don't have to worry about that there. Still think that it is quite slow for standard. For limited, this is probably very good. Getting 4 mana 4/4, not the greatest size to cost, very square body, but you play this, if your opponent can't deal with it, you get to double removal. Probably wins you the game 90% of the time. An important thing, it's not only like the first spell that you cast from your hand that you get dream counters on. So if you cast a bunch of things, they're all going to go into your into exile with these dream counters on them, and then you get access to this whole host of spells to play whenever you get to attack with the Goliath Daydreamer. Yeah, so limited, think pretty darn good. Standard, Pretty slow. Hexing Squelcher is up next for 1 and a red. We have a creature, Goblin Sorcerer, at rare. It is a 2/2 with the spell can't be countered. Has a ward cost of you must pay 2 life. Spells you control can't be countered. And other creatures you control have ward, pay 2 life. This is a pretty good red card, red aggressive card. The question is it better than what is out there already? So currently, red decks are playing Emberheart Champion, which is significantly better than this card. They're playing things like Slickshot Show Off, which in the decks that are playing it, they're synergizing with Slickshot Show Off, and so it's going to be better than this card. They're playing Razorkin Needlehead. Some are even playing things like Zao, and they've got options like Fear of Missing Out. They've got options like Spider Punk, though I think this kind of eats Spider Punk's lunch. That's basically getting around to the point that there are a lot of, they've got things like Raubon even. There are a lot of 2-drops that red has access to. Inti is another one. A lot of 2-drops that red has access to. Giving things uncounterable, it's fine. I could certainly see this being a sideboard card in a red deck. If your opponent is Jeskai Control or Azorius Control, and you're like, I'm bringing in my Hexing Squelcher. They're gonna have to take 2 from shooting the Hexing Squelcher, and if their plan is to counter my stuff, well, sorry, buddy. That seems like the spot for Hexing Squelcher. I don't think that it's quite main deckable. I think that a lot of what you have in Standard right now ends up being better than Hexing Squelcher. Excuse me. But yeah, in Limited, I think a lot of this text is kind of blank. I don't think that it's that great for Limited. It ends up mostly playing just like a bear. So I wouldn't be a high pick in Limited. This would just be like a curve filler in Limited. But Standard, this is certainly a sideboard card. And maybe if you're a Goblin deck, it ends up getting there. But I think if you're just like a generic red deck wins, there's probably better stuff to play in your main. Impolite Entrance. For a single red, we have a sorcery that at uncommon, it says target creature gains trample and haste until end of turn, and draw a card. So 1-mana cantrips are often way better than you think. We already have semi-prowess things going on in Standard. We definitely had it when VV was around. VV and Corey Steelcutter were around. If this card, I do have to think to myself. They designed this card with the idea that this would be playable in a Standard with Corey Steelcutter. Just keep that in mind. They designed this card with the idea that this would be playable in a Standard with VV, which is even more psychotic. They designed this card that it would be playable in a Standard with Heartfire Hero. It has targets, so it triggers Valiant. Just keep that all in mind. Even then, we have Storm Chaser's Talent. We have Drake Hatcher. Astrologian's Planisphere. We don't have Monastery Swiftspear anymore, thank God. But this is still certainly something that these 1-mana cantrip spells have a lot of value in prowess decks. Also, this is giving haste. So we already have these like looting decks with what you call it, the seal, Tiger Seal, and like Quantum Riddler. Like, just think about turn 3. In those decks are already trying to play like some numbers of the Teamer Siege, the 1 blue-red siege that gives everything +1/+0 trample and haste. Well, this is another way to give something trample and haste for 1 mana. Just damn it. Sorry. Phone was going crazy with a emergency alert. Apologies for that. It was just about the snow. Anyways, turn 2 Quantum Riddler, turn 3 this, or turn 3 Quantum Riddler this. Very similar to Wild Ride and stuff like that. This also draws a card, so in those looting decks, this helps you trigger off your Tiger Seals so that they get to untap and get in there. So yeah, just a lot better of a card than you probably think that this looks like. In limited, I'm not so sure. I don't know if there's anything that actually cares about targeting. I don't know if there's anything that really cares about card draw. And since this isn't given any sort of power, I guess we did think about there was the goblin, right? The goblin that we were looking for a way to give it trample. Sure, you can combine this with that goblin that got +2/+0 for each other goblin that you have, or like the big 4-mana 6/6. This gives that card trample. So just like your normal, hey, give something that's already big trample shenanigans. But in constructed formats, I think this is quite a bit better than, or quite more playable. Could see play in those Izzet looting decks. So yeah, Impolite Entrance. Lasting Tarfire is up next for 1 and a red. We have an enchantment at uncommon. It says at the beginning of each end step, if you put a counter on a creature this turn, this enchantment deals 2 damage to each opponent. So here's a payoff for blighting. So you blight something, even if that creature died from the blight, even if it's on you put a counter on something that is not yours. This just starts doming your opponent. It's at uncommon, so it's not like you can go crazy with this. You're not going to see like a billion of these. But if you can draft a couple of these, this is a very quick clock. You have 2 of these in play and just start blighting. Your opponent's dead pretty darn quickly. And even incidentally, this is a pretty good payoff, is just having 1 of these in a blight deck. And it's cheap enough that you're relatively fine for 2 mana do nothing. Standard, I don't really see where this would show up. Like, maybe in some kind of pixie deck, because you, nurturing pixie, pick something up, that gets a +1/+1 counter, and then lasting Tarfire gets to deal some damage there. Often those pixie decks are playing, Cosmogrand Zenith, which, you can put +1/+1 counters on. Maybe in like a Mayhem deck or a discard deck with what's it called? Marauding Mako. Profts is banned, but this would be decent in a Profts style deck. Inti. This also works pretty well with Inti. Inti lets you put a +1/+1 counter on things, and let's start triggering lasting Tarfire. So there's some fun things that you can do. I don't know if it's going to be tier 1 or anything. In standard, even taking a turn off to play a 2-drop is kind of slowish. But there's a world where you can put together some kind of weird deck that takes advantage of lasting Tarfire. And then in limited, this is a nice payoff for blighting. Lava Leaper is up next. For 3 in a red, we have a creature elemental. At rare, it is a 4/4. All creatures have haste, including this one. So it is technically a 3-mana 4/4 haste. Whenever a player taps a basic land, specifically basic land, that's probably the most important part of the card, for mana, that player adds 1 mana of any type that land produced. So I think for the most part, this is very bad. This is kind of a commander card for like a group hug style deck. Because giving your opponents things haste when they didn't build around it, but so many people have got Quantum Riddlers and big idiots that just you giving incidental haste can be quite a boon for them. And then they're the ones who get to get access to this mana boost, this mana flare, essentially earlier than you do. Where this ends up being something where you're like, okay, maybe there's a world, is it has to be basic lands. And given the fact that we're gonna be in a standard that has like 1 billion cards, we're gonna have once Lorwyn comes out, we're gonna have the full set of shock lands for every color pair, along with all of, well, not all of the Verges. You can technically have 10 more flipped versions of the Verges, but pretty much all of the Verges. Things like Starting Town, things like Multiversal Passage, still have all of the Surveil lands. We still have we even have all of the temples. We have some number left of the fast lands. Still have things like Starting Town. If everyone gets so greedy that nobody's playing basics anymore, then you can turn this into a mana flare that's just for you. At which point it's fine. But that's like a very, very, very like magical Christmas land scenario. I think there's going to be enough people who have enough basics that they're going to be able to take advantage of this extra mana before you do, and then you feel like an absolute idiot. And then in limited, I think it's a lot of the same issues. And in limited, people are definitely going to have basics. So they're definitely going to be able to take advantage of that extra mana. Well, I shouldn't say they're definitely going to be able to. you eventually run out of cards. You play this at the right spot. Your opponent's empty-handed or only have one card in hand. They're not going to, unless they have some mana outlet, which we haven't really seen a ton of. They're going to run out. Oh. Excuse me. They're going to run out of things to do. Sorry about all that. Just been talking for a while and got something caught in my throat. They're gonna run out of things to do eventually in limited, which is kind of like silver lining. Excuse me. Kind of like silver lining for something like this. I think it's pretty bad in limited, and probably pretty bad in standard as well. Next up is a pretty fun one. Meek Attack for 2 and a red. We have an enchantment at Mythic. For 1 and a red, you may put a creature card with total power and toughness of 5 or less from your hand onto the battlefield. That creature gains haste at the beginning of your next instep, or the next instep, I should say. Sacrifice that creature, because technically you could do this during your opponent's turn, so it does matter. That is the next instep. Sacrifice it. This is obviously a play on the card Sneak Attack, which is a extremely powerful card from way back in the day. I think it might have been Urza's block, or around there. Sees play in the Powered Cube today. But here you have a much more restrictive, or a much heavier restriction on what you can sneak in with Meek Attack. You have to have something that has total power and toughness 5 or less. In standard, there's really only, I think, 2 creatures that are of any value for something like this. There's, I can't even remember what it's called. It's like, it's this automaton thing from Ixalan, Lost Caverns of Ixalan, that ETBs and generate, it's a 0/0 in your hand, ETBs with like 4+1/+1 counters, and then generates like a number of construct golems equal to its power on ETB and attack. So you get to generate like 8 of these golems with meek attack. And then there's also Famished World Sire, which is another 0/0 that has Devour Land 3. So you play it as a 0/0, and it's going to enter, and you get the ability, you get to decide to sacrifice some number of lands to put some amount of power, or yeah, it puts that number times 3 worth of counters onto the onto it, and then you search your library for any number of, or not search your library, look at the top, or it's not look at the top 12. It's let me pull it up so I'm not getting it wrong. Look at the top X cards of your library, where X is the creature's power, which would be 12. Then put any number of land cards from among them onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. So theoretically, you could actually ramp out with that and get a 12/12 that's attacking. But you could also if you get extremely unlucky, you could be down lands in that scenario. Those I think are the only 2 decent meek attack targets in standard. If a creature has Star, which there are a number, there's things like Lumra and stuff like that. Those know their power and toughness. They know those characteristics, even if they're not on the battlefield. So once you get to enough mana to cast meek attack, your Loomer would already be a 3/3, so it would not be able to be meek attacked out unless you had some like artifact mana to get it out, but then your Loomer is just the 2/2. You're not really getting a ton of value there. So in older formats, there's things like the biggest one I think is Agent of Treachery, which is probably the best thing that you want to be meek attacking out. But in standard, it's pretty weak. But this is certainly a card where, as this spoiler season continues, or the next 3 years worth of spoilers happen for however long that this ends up being in standard, it's something where you'll be like, meek attack target. Clones are interesting things with meek attack. There's actually a good MTG Goldfish short that goes over the top 5 meek attack targets that you should probably just watch there. But there are clones in standard that you can meek attack out with, which could be something, but this is more of a, like, keep this in the back of your mind if there ends up being things that are powerful but weak-bodied and cost a lot of mana. Could you meek attack it out? Do they leave something behind? Do you get value for getting it out way ahead of schedule? Next is Seer. For 1 and a red, we have an instant at uncommon. Seer deals 4 damage to target creature or planeswalker. Pretty good. Kind of roast-ish, kind of... there's been a number of versions of this effect over the years. It's nice that I think the biggest thing out of this is that we saw a lot in when Vivi was around. We saw a lot of red decks just randomly playing copies of Twin Moss Stormbrood so that they get access to that like char effect, that sorcery speed deal 5 to a non-flyer effect, because they just needed something that could, you know, if they didn't have the bolt immediately for, or the strike immediately for the VV, the turn that it was played, or when the first trigger was on the stack or whatever, then it like instantly got out of range and was very difficult to deal with. And you kind of have a very similar situation in current standard for red decks with Ouroboros. You're kind of in this really awkward situation in red where, okay, my opponent is going to have 4 mana available to them on whatever their next turn is. Am I able to be proactive, or do I have to sit here with my strike, letting everyone in the world know that that's what I have in my hand, because I just have to kill this Ouroboros now because I'm not going to have a chance later? Well, Seer, even if I'm proactive and my opponent goes, okay, I'm going to play an Ouroboros, sure, they get the extra value of getting the the counters on whatever the creatures that they have, but this lets you still kill that Ouroboros as long as that's the only thing that gave it a +1/+1 counter. So that's really the biggest thing out of Seer. Definitely going to be a big help for your red decks. The fact that this is instant speed compared to something like Twin Moss Stormbrood, which was sorcery speed. Sure, it dealt 1 additional damage, but this can also hit flyers, which that one wasn't able to do, which is important for things like Aang Swift Savior and Appa and stuff like that. So this is a nice addition. I think they could have gone a little bit further with something like this, but I think this is still gets around a lot of Red's issues with Ouroboros specifically. Sizzling Changeling is up next. For 2 and a red, we have a creature Shapeshifter at uncommon. It is a 3/2 with Changeling. And whenever this creature dies, exile the top card of your library. Until the end of your next turn, you may play that card. 3 mana for a 3/2 Changeling. With Impulse Draw, it's good that you have all the way until your next turn, end of your next turn. So it shouldn't really matter when this dies. You should be able to at least decide whether you want to play that card that got exiled for it. Okay, Blight Holder, because you get to turn it into, you get the value from blighting yourself, and then you also get to turn into some card advantage. It's a changeling, so it fits into any deck as long as you can cast it with the 1 red. This is definitely a synergy piece, and kind of hard to see exactly where this is going to fit if that synergy stuff gets all the way there. I think it's probably fine, but this is wait and see on limited. Certainly not constructed playable. Sourbread Auntie is up next. For 2 red, we have a creature Goblin Warrior at uncommon. It's a 4/3, it's a 4 mana 4/3. A little on the weaker side, but what do we have? When this creature enters, you may blight 2. If you do, create 2 1/1 black and red goblin creature tokens. Sure. Being able to create these little extra tokens gets you more little creatures to take the blight, so that you could then get more value off of it. This itself can, if this is the only thing that you've got, you basically still get 4/3 worth of power and toughness. It's just spread across 3 bodies, because it becomes a 2/1, and then you have 2 1/1 black and red goblin creature tokens. That total power and toughness is still back to 4/3. But obviously, if you have something else that you can put the blight onto, then this is 4 mana for 6/5 worth of power and toughness, which is great. So I think this is a pretty good card in Limited, especially if you're doing the blight stuff. Tweeze is up next. For 2 and a red, we have an instant at common. Tweeze deals 3 damage to any target. You may discard a card. If you do, draw a card. Not going to see any constructed play. Perfectly. This is your common red removal. Seems like we're probably not getting Lightning Strike this time. If they're giving us this, it's just you tack on the 1 extra mana in order to have this draw and discard. But yeah, not much else to say here. Tweeze. You'll pick it up in Limited when you know you need removal. Warren Torchmaster is up next. For 1 and a red, we have a creature Goblin Warrior at uncommon. It is a 2/2, so another bear. At the beginning of combat on your turn, you may blight 1, so consistent way to blight. When you do, target creature gains haste until end of turn. Interesting. Turn 2 this, turn 3 some nice 3-drop, blight itself, turn it into a 1/1, give that 3-drop haste, or maybe even blight the 3-drop and haste it in if for there. Just consistent way to give your next thing haste. Yeah, I think it's pretty good in any sort of Blight Matters deck, any sort of red aggressive deck. Just being able to have haste every single turn. Even theoretically, you give this haste. Turn 2, play this. Go to combat, blight itself, or blight whatever dinky 1-drop for what if you happen to have a dinky 1-drop to get in for 2 or 1 if you hit the blight itself. I don't think that that's probably the way you want to do it. I think you would rather wait for your 3-drop and then put the blight counter on the Torchmaster. And then after that, make your decisions on whether you want to, or what you want to blight to give your next thing haste. But yeah, seems like a pretty good card. All the way to green. We're making moves, making our way through. How many cards do we have left? We got quite a few. I'm going to see if I can get all the way through green, and then we'll call it when we hit the multicolor. And we'll pick it back up tomorrow. So, Assert Perfection for 1 and a green. We have a sorcery at common. Target creature you control gets +1/+0 until end of turn. It deals damage equal to its power up to 1 target creature an opponent controls. So this is your typical bite, sorcery speed. So not as good as like Rocky Rebuke, which I think was a pretty good card for green, pretty good removal spell for green in limited. But this does mean that your this does mean that your creature can trade up a little bit because you're giving it a little bit of a pump. So trading that off for instant speed, you know, 6 in one, half a dozen the other. It's removal. You'll know when you need it. Aurora Awakener. For 6 in a red, we have a creature, Giant Druid at Mythic. It is a 7/7 with Trample, and it has Vivid. When this creature enters, reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal X permanent cards, where X is the number of colors among permanents you control. Put any number of those permanent cards onto the battlefield, then put the rest of the revealed cards on the bottom of your library in a random order. So if you hit Vivid, the biggest problem with this is it just says permanent cards. It doesn't say non-land permanents. So you could go through all these hoops to get this 7-drop into play. Making sure that you got all 5 colors, all that shenanigans going on. And then you just hit 5 lands, which is fine. Ramping 5 is fine, but for 7 mana, you've already got a bunch of mana. You don't need more mana. You need a way to kill your opponent. The way to get around this is MDFCs. Your lands that are spells before their lands. So I kind of joked that this was Pioneer's Belcher, but then somebody pointed out that a lot of your MDFCs, the front halves are creatures. So yeah. So I don't really know where this card goes. I think it's kind of just commander coded derogatory. It kind of just does big flashy things and doesn't quite get there. If somebody can find a way to get this thing going and get some like game-winning combo off of it, then sure. But we already have turn 4 kills, turn 4 infinites with Kona and Omniscience. It's my biggest hate of the card Omniscience is that you don't get to brew. There's no fun because it's like, okay, what can I do that's better than playing a card that says everything is free? Probably nothing. There's probably nothing that you can do ever that says that says what's better than playing everything free. You kind of have to go smaller or more controlling. And if you're gonna do some combo shenanigans, you just do Omniscience stuff. I say that when we have sort of creature combo-y, Spectacular Spider-Man stuff going on. I think for the most part that gets around the Kona stuff because it's a little easier to put together and it ends up beating for not always being instant win. It ends up being good enough for your opponent to scoop, for most of your opponents to scoop. But yeah, I'm just gonna complain about Omniscience until it finally rotates in 2028. or they finally get bored of its existence in standard, realize that it was a dumb idea to put it into foundations and get rid of it, when they should have gotten rid of it when they got rid of Abuelos. I know in the banned and restricted announcements they talked about how they want to have things like omniscience in standard. It kills so many brewing opportunities because you just realize just cheat omniscience into play. Why are you wasting your time? Anyways, Aurora Awakener. Limited, 7 mana is a lot, but this probably, well, I was gonna say it probably wins a lot of games. It probably wins a lot of games. It's a big idiot itself. It's got trample, and then if you get anything, any non-lands off of this, that tempo swing is just gonna be way bigger than anything that your opponent can do. So this is gonna win a lot of limited games. But yeah, Aurora Awakener. Bloom Tinder is up next. This is an exciting one for all of the commander players out there. For 1 in the green, we have a creature elf druid at Mythic. It's a 1/1 with Vivid. Tap for each color among permanents you control. Add 1 mana of that color. Yeah, a pretty expensive card. It's a reprint, and it's a pretty expensive card on the market these days because it hasn't been reprinted a ton. And even when it has, like, it's been quite a while since it was been reprinted. So it's like a $20 card or so. So this is gonna be nice to get that, get more supply of this into the market. As far as standard goes, I don't know how good this is going to end up being. Badger Ball Cubs just does a lot of what this card does, while also putting 2 bodies on the battlefield and potentially ramping you even heavier than Bloom Tinder. So I don't really know. The dream with Bloom Tinder is opening hand, you have a Leyline of the Guild Pact. You play that. You Leyline that out, dump it out immediately. And then your Bloom Tinder can tap for 5 mana on turn 3. So that you can play an 8-drop, which lets you immediately turn 3 go into an Ugin or some other big nonsense play. That specific scenario is probably a little bit faster than your Badger Mole Cub stuff, but that's like so far out there. Maybe it's good enough. I think for the most part, people are just going to keep doing Badger Mole Cub stuff, and I don't think that this provides a ton more than what you're already doing with Badger Mole Cub. And as far as limited goes, this is certainly pretty good in limited. Mana dorks generally are pretty good. Even if you don't have any other colors, this is just a generic mana dork. You've seen 2 mana dorks see play in a lot of limited formats, and once this starts tapping for 2 or 3, you're gonna overpower your opponent very, very quickly. So yeah, Bloom Tinder. Blossoming Defense, another reprint. For a single green, we have an instant at uncommon. Target creature you control gets +2/+2 and gains hexproof until end of turn. It's weird because we have Snakeskin Veil, and I don't really know when this is better or when this is worse. This is better in if you're just trying to, you know, if you're in a non-interactive game and you just want to go, okay, my Snakeskin Veils aren't really doing a ton. At least this is 1 mana, gives something +2/+2. It's a little bit better at getting more damage through immediately. But like, if we're talking about things like Mossborn Hydra, which is real where you see most Snakeskin Veils being played, then you'd much rather have the +1/+1 counter, because your landfall triggers give additional +1/+1, or double the amount of +1/+1 counters you have. So, and that's really where you're seeing things like main deck Snakeskin Veils seeing play. So I don't know if this is going to replace anything like that in your, you know, traditional, your like Tifa, your Zaz's Chocobo style mono green landfall decks. Maybe people play this over something like Snakeskin Veil in like Gruul Delirium. Because you have that, okay, I'm gonna Blossoming Defense, give that thing hexproof, and then Violent Urge to give it double strike. And I'm just trying to hit you very, very quickly instead of make this one big giant thing. So maybe in those decks you would play Blossoming Defense over something like Snakeskin Veil. But it's just nice to have the option between one of the two. In limited, you know, Octopus Form was pretty good in Avatar Limited. Into the Avatar State was alright. Magic Damper was fine. This is going to be perfectly fine to blink your opponent's removal and really get them. And just use as a regular old combat trick. So probably a pretty good card in limited. And one of many options that you have between Shard Mage's Rescue, Snakeskin Veil, Royal Authority, I forget the name of that card. The one that gives hexproof and then a roll token. But yeah, Blossoming Defense. Bristlebane Battler is up next. For 1 and a green, we have a creature Kithkin Soldier at rare. It is a 6/6 for 2 with Trample and Ward 2. There's got to be a downside, and there certainly is. This creature enters with 5 -1/-1 counters on it, so it's really a 2 mana 1/1. Whenever another creature you control enters, while this has a -1/-1 counter on it, remove a -1/-1 counter from this creature. I think this card's pretty good. Especially if you're able to go wide. You're not going to play this in rabbits because it's not a rabbit, but in a rabbits style deck, in a go wide deck, this can pretty quickly get back up to a reasonable size, and then it's got Trample and Ward 2, so your opponent's going to have difficulty getting it off the battlefield. You go turn 2 Bristlebane Battler, turn 3 hop to it. Swinging, you move 3 -1/-1 counters. It's a 2 it becomes a 4/4 with Trample and Ward 2. Seems pretty good to me. And then in limited, kind of the same thing, but probably better, probably way better in limited. Well, not a very good top deck, I should say that. But if you get this out, on turn 2, it's eventually just going to grow to be the best thing on the board. And given the fact that as a trample in Ward 2, your opponent's going to have difficulty getting rid of it. So certainly not great to draw in the late game, but if you're any kind of aggressive deck, if you can get this out on turn 2, turn 3, seems pretty good. Champions of the Perfect. For 3 and a green, we have a creature, Elf Warrior, at rare. It is a 6/6. It has an additional cost to cast a spell, Behold an Elf, and exile it. So again, either an elf on the battlefield or an elf in your hand. And again, if you've got a kindred spell or kindred permanent that is of creature type elf, then that also counts. Whenever you cast a creature spell, draw a card. When this creature leaves the battlefield, return the exiled card to its owner's hand. I think this is pretty good. So, Beast Whisperer, I think that was the name of the card. That's a staple in Commander, specifically. It's 2 green for like a 3/4, or maybe even like a 2/3 that has whenever you cast a creature spell, draw a card. This one's a little bit more difficult because you do have to have elf synergy. You can't just play this in any old green deck. Given the fact that we have Llanowar Elves in Standard, that's perfectly fine. You've already got the value you want out of your Llanowar Elf by just casting a 4-drop on turn 3. And then just chaining more elves to draw cards. There's Elfish Archdruid, which is incredible with something like this. You get a bunch of elves onto the battlefield. The Elfish Archdruid can tap for 1 billion. There's even things like Growing Rights of Itlimoc out there in Standard that hasn't really seen a ton of play, but if you're doing elf ball shenanigans, then this seems all right to me. So yeah, I think if there is an elf ball deck, then this is a pretty good card for it. And then in limited, kind of the same thing. You don't have to be fully elf, just as long as you have 1 extra elf. This is going to get you so much card advantage, as long as they can't immediately kill it. And it's a 6/6 for 4, so it's going to be the biggest thing on the battlefield. So yeah, seems pretty good in limited. Seems like it could be okay in Standard if elf ball becomes a thing. Yeah, Champions of the Perfect. Chomping Changeling. For 2 and a green, we have a creature shapeshifter at uncommon. It is a 1/2 with Changeling, and then when it ETBs, destroy up to 1 target artifact or enchantment. So this is Reclamation Sage at home. It technically is also an elf, but it's a 1/2 instead of a 2/1. I mean, it's a perfectly reasonable card. I don't know how many, from a limited perspective, I don't know how prevalent artifacts and enchantments are going to be. Certainly going to get a lot better. And I'm just realizing, did he like eat the, yeah, he ate the sword. That's why his mouth is so weird. Anyways, if you're in the market for a, jeez, this thing again, National Weather Service squall warning. That's just high winds. Okay. Sorry about that. If you're in the market for a reclamation sage, this is an option. I think Lorwyn rotated. Yeah, it was not reprinted in Foundations. And then Reclamation Sage. Is that in Foundations? That is in Foundations. So I think in Standard, if you're really looking for a Reclamation Sage style effect, unless you're in green and have non-elf synergy, at which point Chomping Changeling would be fine. But in basically any other scenario, if you're looking for Reclamation Sage, it's literally in Standard. This is more for weird commander stuff or for the limited format, being a changeling and being able to deal with artifacts and enchantments. We did see that there's the blue pacifism and the banishing light, the O-ring effect, which is this could certainly hit, and those are both at common. So yeah, probably gonna be okay and limited as well. So yeah, Chomping Changeling. Crossroads Watcher. Yo, has got a neck. Holy. For 2 and a green, we have a creature Kithkin Ranger at common. It is a 3/3 with trample. 3 mana 3/3 with trample. Alright stats. Whenever another creature you control enters, this creature gets +1/+0 until end of turn. Sure. Generally attacks as a 4/3 with trample. It's alright. Decent curve filler. Not going to see any constructed play, obviously, but the fact that this has trample is the big thing for it. There's a card, Loperit Scout from Final Fantasy. It did a lot of the same things as this card, but it didn't have trample and was basically unplayable. Formidable Speaker. This is Jean-Emmanuel Depraz's invitational card. I guess World Championship card. For 2 and a green, we have a creature Elf Druid at rare. It is a 2/4 that when it ETBs, you may discard a card. If you do, search your library for a creature card, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle, and then for 1 and tap, untap another target permanent. This card, I think, is quite good in the Standard, very specifically for the Superior Spider-Man deck. That deck is already mostly Sultai, and what this allows you to do is you play this on turn 3, you dump your Bringer of the Last Gift into your graveyard, and you tutor up you get essentially 1 activation of a card called Survival of the Fittest, which was a very powerful card from back in the day, to allow you to tutor up creatures at the cost of discarding 1. This is a 1-shot on a 2/4 body, so you dump your Bringer of the Last Gift, you tutor up your Kavero, so you're basically guaranteeing, if you want the ability, maybe you want to wait until you have more creatures in your graveyard or whatever, but you're basically guaranteeing the ability to go off the turn after you play the Formidable Speaker. Obviously, you have to have the Bringer in your hand, but hey, maybe you already dumped a Bringer into your graveyard and you want to put an Arden or a Terror of the Peaks or a Meringue River Regent or whatever have you. It's just a tutor that you play on curve for your turn 4 Kavero. Just incredibly good. good in a lot of other decks. Just having this one-shot tutor effect. You want to get. You're searching for an Urborvoid. You're searching for a Creative of Behemoth. Hey, here you go. You're searching for. I don't think the Teamer Otter thing. I don't think it hits elves, so it's not going to be a part of there. But hey, maybe you can. They're playing Teamer. There's a world where maybe you play this in there, and then the bottom part, the activated part, not really that relevant in Standard. It's obviously there for something like Legacy Elves, where you're playing Gaia's Cradle. You get sort of a one way to get a double tap of your Gaia's Cradle, maybe in like Pioneer for something in the same way that you'd use like Kiora to untap your Nykthos. You can use this to untap your Nykthos. But yeah, there's nothing. I shouldn't say there's nothing like that. There's I shouldn't say literal Gaia's Cradle. There's the station land that can act as a Gaia's Cradle in the Standard. I don't think anybody's ever actually tried to use it as a actual factual Gaia's Cradle. But hey, with this, maybe there's a world where people actually try and station it up to turn it on. I think that seems a little slow. But it's definitely, it slots right into those old format decks. Old format elf decks. In limited. 3 mana for 2/4, it's already an alright body. You can untap anything, so you can kind of give something pseudo-vigilance. And then you get to tutor out your big bomb. Yeah, I think it's still probably fine and limited. As long as you have a good creature to go and grab. Even if it's just like an on-curve creature or a decently statted creature, or maybe it's like a creature that FTKs or something like that, or draws you cards. So lets you get to that as long as you have something that you can discard. You don't even have to discard a creature, you can just discard anything. Yeah. A very, very good card in many formats in Constructed, and probably pretty good in Limited as well. Great Forest Druid. Speaking of 2-drop mana dorks, 1 and a green for a creature Treefolk Druid at common. It's an 0/4 with tap to add 1 mana of any color. 0/4 is nice in the fact that it's just a big wall. No power is a little annoying because your opponent can just keep swinging, and sure, you get to block something, but they're not. They don't have to worry about their 1 toughness creature trading with this thing. But still, it's fine. 2 mana dorks are perfectly reasonable in limited environment. Not gonna see. There are a lot of decks playing a lot of like pretty questionable mana dorks in Standard right now. This is a little too questionable to play for Standard. Lis Alana Informant is up next. For 1 and a green, we have a creature Elf Scout at common. It's a 3/1. When ETBs or dies, surveil 1. Pretty good. Pretty good 2-drop for limited. Has both an ETB and a dies trigger. Trades. Attacks fairly well. Blocks very well. Trades pretty well. You get to sculpt your draw on ETB and sculpt it again on when it dies. I think a pretty high common pick, I would say, for Lysalana Informant. Midnight Tilling is up next. For 1 in green, we have an instant at common. Mill 4 cards and may return a permanent card from among them to your hand. This is just cash grab from Bloomburrow, but there's no fun synergy with like squirrels. So I don't think that this is going to see any standard play because it's literally just cash grab. And there's so many different versions of that type of effect. There's the enchantment from Aether Drift that you get like extra life. You get life from things leaving your graveyard. And then otherwise it's just cash grab. Which generally there's no squirrel synergy going on when you're playing cash grab, but like I don't think anybody's really going to be like, oh, I'd rather play Midnight Tilling. They're just going to take the cards that they already own. And as far as limited goes, it's fine. This type of effect, not on a body, is a little awkward, but if you do have any sort of graveyard synergy, which is a lot of the elf decks, you're gonna get some decent value. Important to note, this is, you only get to pick up a permanent from among the cards that you milled, so this is not like Overlord of the Baelmerk, where you mill 4 and then pick from any of the cards in your graveyard. It's just of the 4 that you milled. Morkint's Eyes. For 1 in a green, we have a Kindred Enchantment Elf at uncommon. At the beginning of your upkeep, surveil 1, and then for 4 green and sacrifice this, create X 2/2 black and green elf creature tokens, where X is the number of elf cards in your graveyard. Activate only as a sorcery. So that last part's a little annoying, but really, this is just Search for Azcanta. It's not nearly as good as Search for Azcanta, but it's Search for Azcanta at home, right? When Search for Azcanta was printed, it was before Surveil was actually a keyword. So if you look at Search for Azcanta, like the original printings of Search for Azcanta, it's going to have a lot of text on it. It's literally just the exact same as at the beginning of your upkeep Surveil 1. Azcanta flips into a land that you could then get a lot of card advantage on and had a lot of value in your Simic Nexus decks. There's still a world, I think, where this could see standard play in like some very controlling Golgari deck. Maybe I'm overvaluing it. We do have just Unholy Annex existing in the format right now. For just 1 more mana, you get actual card advantage and a theoretical win con. Here, this is just surveilling. For 1 less mana, yeah, I might be... My blindness for my love of the Simic Nexus deck might be making me overvalue this. In limited, though, this is a great payoff for self-mill in your elf deck. And it also self-enables, so if you're slow enough, if the format is slow enough and your deck is slow enough, this could be pretty good. Mutable Explorer is up next. For 2 and a green, we have a creature Shapeshifter at rare. It is a 1/1 changeling that has, when this creature enters, create a tapped Mutavault token. So what is a Mutavault token? Well, it's a land with tap to add 1 colorless or pay a single colorless as an activated ability to turn it into a 2/2 creature that essentially has Changeling. It has all creature types until end of turn, and it's still a land. So Mutavault is a very, very powerful creature land. We have a lot of creature lands in Standard, and there have been many creature lands printed throughout the years. Mutavault's still pretty good. Sees a lot of play in Pioneer, in your like Pioneer Demons decks, like your Rakdos Demons or Mono Black Demons decks, because it itself is a demon. And I think if Mutavault was actually factually printed in Standard, it would be, you would just get rid of every single copy of Soulstone Sanctuary that's ever been printed. You would just rip them to pieces because Mutavault would just immediately replace them. Because it's just so much better. Now, we don't actually have Mutavault. We have this thing that creates a Mutavault. And I don't know how good this is. It is 3 mana for ramp, which we have a billion versions of this effect in the Standard. We have Lumbering World Wagon, we have Earthbender Ascension, we have plus Precious Wanderings. There's 1,000 like common versions of this effect. There's all over the place. There's the Overlord of the Haunt Woods. That's not even really seeing play anymore. I don't know if playing a really weak 3-drop in order to get access to a Mutavault token is really good enough. Maybe in like a Golgari Demons deck, you can kind of get away with this for the same reason that you like Mutavault in your Demons decks in Pioneer. But you're playing like a pretty bad card to get access to a good card. Maybe if you think about it like I'm playing a good card, I'm playing Mutavault that comes with a 1/1. I don't know. I guess it itself is a changeling. Maybe I'm not so far off there because this itself is a demon. Maybe this he's playing like a Golgari Demons deck. I might have talked myself into it. Like a Golgari ramp demon style deck. You get your Mutavault token. You're fine with doing a board wipe because you're going to have your Mutavault token still sitting around. You can turn that into a demon whenever you need to with your Unholy Annex. Yeah, maybe. I might have just talked myself into it. The fact that this itself is a demon, so you can just use your Mutavault for actual mana on the turns where you want to cast things. And then on the turns where if they get rid of this thing or you don't have any other demons in play, you get to use that Mutavault to turn into a demon. Yeah, okay. I turned back around. In Limited, I'm not so sure. 3 mana for a 1/1. Sure, it ramps you. That type of ramp has been in Limited at common for a while. It doesn't come with the 1/1, but doesn't seem like a very high pick. Selfless Safe Right is up next for 3 green. We have a creature Elf Warrior at rare. It is a 4/2 with Flash and Convoke. And when this creature enters, choose a creature type. Other permanents you control of that type gain hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. So your Flash save the team style effect that comes on a 4/2 body. I feel like there's a billion versions of this effect in Standard. The fact that this has Convoke is good. And even though this is an elf, it can save other things. Like, where I really see this is something like, there's the Super Fringe Simic Merfolk deck that's playing like Deeproot Pilgrimage and the 2-drop vehicle. You convoke out a bunch of stuff, you get your Deeproot Pilgrimage trigger, and then you get to save all your Merfolk with this. It's still 5 mana. I don't know. Seems a little expensive to me. Seems like a commander card. For limited, flashing in a 4/2 that maybe saves something from like targeted removal, it's probably fine in limited. I just don't really see it as being that playable in constructed. Shimmer Wild's Growth is up next. For 1 and a green, we have an enchantment aura at uncommon. It says enchant land. As this aura enters, choose a color. Enchanted land is the chosen color. And then whenever enchanted land is tapped for mana, its controller adds an additional 1 mana of the chosen color. So this is a pretty good Vivid enabler, because we mentioned it when we were talking about the other Vivid cards, that lands really aren't colored. They're colorless. But this itself is green, obviously, and it then gives the land that it's enchanted to an actual color. So as long as you choose something other than green, then just by having this on the battlefield, you've gained 2 colors for your Vivid payoffs. Plus, it ramps you. Seems like a pretty good card in your Vivid decks. Probably fine in other things. I don't think that there's any... I don't know for certain, but I don't think that there's any sort of land destruction, even like super expensive land destruction. There was things like Price of Freedom in Avatar. I don't think we've seen anything that's anywhere close to something like that in this set. I imagine with a card like this, they're not going to print something like that for this set. But if a, Demolition Field type effect comes in, well, maybe not Demolition Field, but some even expensive way to destroy a land comes out, these stocks go way down. But I doubt that there's going to be something there. Surly Farrier is up next. For 1 and a green, we have a creature, Kithkin Citizen. At common, it's a 2/2, so another bear. Target creature, and you can tap it to have target creature you control get +1/+1 and gain vigilance until end of turn. Activate only as a sorcery. I mean, it's just a bear. It gets a little bit of value late in the game. You can... it's probably fine. Fine curve filler. If you've got a fly... For limited, obviously. Not constructed playable. If you've got a flyer, you can pump up your flyer, make it so that it can attack and still be available to block for your opponent's flyer. It's probably fine. Tend the Springs is up next. Hey, here's a 3-drop sorcery that lets you ramp. For 2 and a green, we have Search Your Library for a basic land card. Put it on the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. And if you control 7 or more lands and or tree folk, so that means 7 or more lands, the combination of lands and tree folk that you have is 7 or more. Then you create a 3/2 green tree folk creature token with reach. I think this card's okay. This is probably them trying to work in the design space of ramp is a lot of ramp cards, especially in the limited environment. Well, really in any environment, but really in limited. If you don't get them on curve, then they're like literal blank pieces of cardboard. Maybe you can like convince yourself that you're doing some deck thinning shenanigans, but for the most part, you rip this off the top in the late game, it's like, this is the worst draw in my deck. Here, you rip this off the top in the late game, it's not great, but you do, you might be able to get a 3-mana 3/4 with reach, which is not like the greatest card in the world, but it's fine. It turns your ramp card that otherwise is blank cardboard when you have 6 lands already into an actual creature, which is, I think, the design space that they're really going for. The whole tree folk thing is just synergistic with the tree folk in the set. I don't think that there's really much going on there. I could see them continuing on this trend. Very similar to what they did with Persh's Wanderings, is you have this instant speed combat trick ramp. Like, Persh's Wanderings still late in game, not the greatest thing to draw, but at least it had some value. You get a +1/+1 counter on your dork. This is a lot better than Persh's Wanderings in super late game. But I like their exploration of the design space of your limited level ramp cards, making it so that they're not just like absolutely garbage in the late game. Yeah, I think a fine pick. Tristan, Callous Cultivator, is up next. Here's our elf version of one of these flip creatures. For 2 and a green, we have a 3/4 with Death Touch, legendary creature, Elf Druid at rare. Whenever this creature enters or transforms back into this side, you mill 3, and then if there is an elf card in your graveyard, you gain 2. So, Graveyard Enabler, Graveyard Payoff, all wrapped into one, and as a 3/4 with Death Touch. This is probably one of the better front halves of these cards that I've seen. I think Sig's pretty good. I think actually Sig's probably the best. This might be number 2. The other ones were kind of like Ashling was kind of weak. Have we seen the blue fronted one? I don't know if we have. We haven't seen like the fairy version of one of these flip cards. Anyways, so what about the back half? The beginning of your first main phase, you may pay a single black. If you do, flip it over. So turn 3, you play this. Turn 4, you pay a black, and you for the cost of flipping this and only getting access to 3 mana on turn 4. What do you get? You still get your 3/4 with Death Touch, and whenever it flips into this side, again, mill 3, and you may exile an elf card from among your graveyard. If you do, each opponent loses 2. I want to go back. Okay, interesting. So the front half says, if I... Oh, that sucks. That's not keeping the front half says, hey, as long as there's an elf in the graveyard, you get your 2 life. The back half kind of cannibalizes the front half, because it takes those elves that were in your graveyard, eats them, in order to gain you, or in order to hit your opponent for 2. So if you ever decide to flip it back over, then gonna have to hit another elf in order to get that, in order to gain that life. This is one of those cards that you're really gonna have to be flipping constantly to get much value out of it, unless you're fine with just leaving it on the, well, no. Yeah, none of these aren't like Ashlings. They're only doing things on transformation or ETB. So you really want to be flipping it over and over and over and over again. And if you're flipping it over and over again, you're milling yourself pretty heavily. So I think this is a pretty good one. I could see it being an elf synergistic thing, but I could see it as just, hey, I've got some number of these in some number of Llanowar elves, and I'm just doing like Insidious Roots stuff. Hey, this back half works pretty well with Insidious Roots. I exile the elf from my graveyard. That triggers Insidious Roots. That triggers the gain 1 life thing. So yeah, I think this card's pretty cool. In limited, 3 mana 3/4 with Death Touch, already a decent card, and then you get some, a lot of the same reasons. It's not gonna, there's not as much synergy with, or obviously not with Insidious Roots or what have you, but this is a pretty good, again, self-enabler and payoff for trying to mill yourself. Yeah, cool card. Vinebred Brawler. For 2 and a green, we have a creature Elf Berserker at uncommon. It is a 4/2, 3 mana 4/2. Interesting. This creature must be blocked if able. So it's got Lure, I think is what they called it. Well, not exactly. Lure, all creatures had to block that thing. This is, it just has to be blocked by something. And then whenever this creature attacks, another target elf you control gets +2/+1 until end of turn. It's okay. You don't get to choose what blocks it, but you can kind of navigate yourself into a position where this kind of acts like removal, and then you get a little bit of a pump on something else of yours. It's fine. I don't really see elves as like the aggressive deck, but it's something. Not really playable in standard. This one, however, Virulent Emissary. For a single green, we have a creature Elf Assassin at uncommon. It is a 1/1 with Death Touch. Already, 1/1 with Death Touch, already a perfectly playable limited card. Whenever another creature you control enters, you gain 1 life. Hey, it's another Soul Sister. And it's in green. And it's a 1/1 with Death Touch. This is a great card. This could easily see constructed play. There's plenty of Soul Sister mono white players that I think they'd be fine dipping into green. Maybe not. Maybe they're just fine playing the same deck that they've played for 13 years. But if you want to expand your horizons a little bit and try a new card, this is probably better than something like an Aunt May. I could easily see the C play in standard, and then in limited, you're already fine just having a 1/1 for 1 with Death Touch, because it's just gonna eventually have to either eat removal or your opponent's you're gonna decide to trade it with something of your opponent's. And then even in the scenario where your opponent just has a bunch of like, they're chipping in with like little things or whatnot, you can just play creatures and just gain life back as you're waiting for them to get impatient and finally either use removal on this or be fine with trading with this. So This card is very good, I think, in limited. Whew. And we finally made it, even after almost choking to death. We are to the multicolored cards, and this is where we are going to stop for the day. So, lots of cards gone through. Still plenty of more cards to be spoiled throughout the rest of this week. We're just looking at the... should have mentioned this at the very top, but we are just looking at the standard legal cards. Maybe considering that I did some... I'm focusing a little more on limited. Maybe I can look at like the bonus sheet stuff, since that's going to have some impact in a draft perspective. But we're not going to be looking at the cards from the Commander precons. You've got plenty of other content creators to go and evaluate those cards. But yeah, we've got the multicolors, the artifacts, the lands, plus anything that's going to get spoiled between now and my next stream to go over. Fast and Furious, only 1 week of spoilers. So, gonna be probably back at this right away tomorrow. If not, I will see you sooner rather than later. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time I see you.